Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you could join us all. And thank you for joining Sunrise County Economic Council for our discussion surrounding community-driven broadband. I am Elaine Abbott, Community and Economic Development Planner with Sunrise County Economic Council. And I'm joined by my colleague, Crystal Hitchings, who you know of her previous work with the Washington County Council of Governments and her current work with the Down East Acadia Regional Tourism. So just a few housekeeping details before we get started. This discussion is being recorded and will be posted on the Sunrise County Economic Council's website for future use. The same information will be presented again live this Thursday at 6 p.m. All questions will be held for the last 30 minutes of our program, but you can feel free to post the questions in the chat box, or you can ask them live at the end of both presentations. Please mute yourselves so everyone may have the best audio experience. And first, we will hear from Daniel Sullivan, President of Down East Broadband Utility, and City Manager Mike Ellis. He's City Manager of Calais, and we're hoping to be joined by Chris Laughlin, Baileyville Town Manager, and they formed a cooperative municipally owned broadband utility. Following that presentation will be an entirely different approach to municipally owned broadband, presented by Roque Bluff's resident and 19-year select person, Lisa Hanscom, and Nate Brimmer, Vice President of Operations with Axiom Technologies. Again, thank you for joining Sunrise County Economic Council for this timely discussion on community-driven broadband. So let's get started. Dan, over to you.
Okay, morning, everybody. Mike, just jump in as you see fit. I'm just going to give an overview of what Down East Broadband Utility, how it started and its general condition right now. Then I've got just a couple of quick slides on what exactly fiber is and why we feel that it's an important piece of the broadband situation in Maine, well, actually across the whole country. This started as a concept back in 2015 with Julie Jordan, who was then the Economic Development Director for both Calais and Baileyville. And they were looking for some sort of method of increasing economic development in these towns, and broadband kept surfacing as a major concern. That, you know, we have the existing companies, which were Fairpoint Consolidated or Time Warner Spectrum, but they were not actually satisfying the need that everyone had for a decent, affordable broadband piece. So the towns got together in 2016, and then through various meetings we had with select board people, with city councils, with Chamber of Commerce's and Lions Clubs, and just about everybody you can think of, we started talking about this and about the concept of doing this. One of the first things Julie did was contact Consolidated and Spectrum and ask them if we could help them improve broadband for these two towns. They, you know, their argument was that it's too rural, there's not enough customers, so we can't afford it. So the towns got together and said, well, maybe we can help offset some of that cost if you'll provide the service. They both said no. They were not interested in doing anything. So the towns got together and said, okay, they're not going to do it, so how about us? So we had a feasibility study done. Can this happen? Would it be a wise thing to do? We went through those steps. It came back and said, yeah, it's feasible. So then when they went in 2017, they were to get the network cost. What was it going to cost to do both of these towns? And the concept that we wanted, which we ended up building, is called an open access dark fiber network. That's a lot of words jammed in there. Basically, what that means is that the towns themselves own the actual physical infrastructure. The wires that are stapled on the poles are owned by the people of Calais and Baileyville, and now Alexander, and there'll be others coming on as well. But so the physical infrastructure is owned by the towns. An ISP, an internet service provider, leases from the towns the ability to provide service to a customer. We have one ISP right now, Pioneer, and we're in negotiations with a couple of others. So we're hoping we're going to have 3 here pretty shortly, but right now it's Pioneer. And they offer 100 by 100 beginning connection for $59 a month. There's no installation cost. There's no, they'll go up, I think it's 1,700 feet, is it, Mike? Up to where they'll go that far from the telephone pole to a person's house. So it's basically no setup charges, no modem costs. It's just you sign up for the service and you're up and running. Well, we've finished about 99% of both of these towns. We have two little sections left, Lamb's Farm and Nash's Lake. Those are the most rural parts of the network. I just heard the other day that Lamb's Farm, the licensing has been cleared, and that according to Tim, they'll be building that shortly. Nash's Lake, I think they're still waiting. Mike might be able to answer this for what holds this whole thing up, which is there's a bill out there right now we're hoping is going to fix this, is Consolidated can take up to 170 days to allow a person to attach to the pole. And they've been taking that time and more. So, and it's not completely their fault. They're kind of short on labor, I think, too. They don't have the engineers they need in order to be able to get this done faster. But at any rate, those two pieces will be shortly begin construction. Alexander, the same way. Some licensing in Alexander has been freed up. So construction is going to begin there. Indian Township, which is signed on to DBU as of our last meeting, they now have a representative on the board. Their network build, I think it's like 50 or 60% done. And that shouldn't be that much longer. They'll be signing up customers from Indian Township. Princeton, I believe, just got their network costs. So they're determining whether they're going to go forward with that. Cooper, I've got the Cooper's network costs. I know that number. So I'm actively trying to do some grant research and just to kind of see if we can get some help, because Cooper's a small little town and there's only about 120 people there. And the network build for Cooper is around $490,000. So that's not inexpensive for a small town, but there's a lot of money out there. So between the new MCA authority, the Maine just formed, then speaking of Connect Me, the DBU project, we have this software that takes care of all of our fiber connections. So we understand the network, where everybody is. It's called a Vetro piece. That's the company. It's not inexpensive to have this software, but Connect Me has given DBU a grant for the first year's cost to cover that. So that's helping us out a little bit on the DBU side. So there's funds out there. It's just a matter of going out to get them. Now, I'm going to just show a couple of slides here, and then I'll let Mike chime in. He can give some thoughts on what the perspective is from a person in his positions. He lives this, and he talks to people on a daily basis. He has some valuable information. But I had some, just for people that don't understand what is going on here, the fiber is, because we built what's called a home run network. It means every person who's on this network has their own dedicated piece of fiber. So that was one of the major selling pieces to this for the towns, is that we've basically set up Calais and Baileyville and the other towns that are joining with a system that technology has not maxed out yet. They have not found out how fast you can run data down a fiber line yet, because they can't stop it. It's going 186,000 miles per second. So we've built this network, so it's basically what they refer to as future-proof, that as the technology changes, all we have to do in these towns is to go into our communication huts and you change out the lasers, the equipment. You don't have to go up on the poles and redo the wires. You don't have to get new licensing. All that is in place. So as technology changes, and anybody in this discussion knows full well, it changes almost on a weekly basis. We are Calais and Baileyville, this municipal broadband utility, which is the first and only one in the state of Maine, is set for the next 100+ years. And we won't be at the whim of ISPs, raising prices when they feel like it, because there's competition. That's what keeps things at a lower cost, and you get better service that way. That is kind of the American dream. So I'm going to see if I can share this screen here just for a second, just to give a, let's see, okay, all participants. Hang on one second. Is anybody seeing what I'm seeing? Hang on a second. Can anybody see that slide?
No, they might need to make you host or a shared host.
He already is.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
I'm saying all participants, but maybe I'll just have to talk it then.
Try again.
Yeah, it says, All right, because I'll just have to talk it.
Okay, if you want to try stopping and then starting again with the share, that may or may not help.
No, let's try it again.
Yay, that's working.
Is that better?
You've got it, Danny.
Okay. So basically, I've only got a couple of slides here I'll go through. About 10, 12 years ago, the United States was 13.
Danny, it's only showing you're introducing Zoom apps page. It's showing your Zoom apps page, not
All
your
right.
slide.
I don't want to take up time here. I'll just talk it through it.
You're almost there, but
Yeah, I think you have to go to the actual page and then share
Yep, you can change screen.
and then reshare.
Well, I think I'm just gonna.
If you,
I don't want to
Danny,
take
if you just stop share, open the presentation, and then start share, you should be good.
All right, let's stop. Let's see.
Stop share in Zoom.
Yeah, so I'm looking for stop share right there. Okay, and then we're going to try to share it again.
Click on get into your presentation and then share again.
Oh, okay. Now see my application. You're seeing that now?
No.
Don't see Down East Broadband?
No.
It says I'm screen sharing.
No,
All right.
What we see is your desktop, your internet.
We know that you're shopping for Newell post caps. maybe while Danny's looking, Mike,
Mike, go ahead. Let me see if I can.
Maybe Mike can chat a little bit about what broadband.
Perfect. Yep.
Sure. I appreciate the invitation to be here. It's my pleasure. I am the city manager of Calais. I'm also serve on the DBU board. According to the utility bylaws, the city manager or a town manager designated to be on that board. We also have a member of our select board, and in our case, city council serving on the DBU board, and each have a member at large. So yeah, this whole initiative, like Danny said, like a lot of times I ride his coattails. He's been here from the inception, even the concept, of two rival communities being able to get together and form the first utility of its kind in the state of Maine. That took a lot. It took a lot legally. It took a lot insurance wise to get this thing off the ground. There was a lot of resources because we had to go for the folks. One thing I would like to get into here in a little bit is some of the things Danny didn't touch on about what differentiates us from whether it's other utilities or other providers, if you will, in our network. But the whole thing was born out of an economic development initiative, as Danny mentioned, and there are a lot of as Julie Jordan was out pounding the streets drumming up business, there were a lot of sightings of slow speed internet, how they just didn't want to set up shop around here because we weren't into the modern age yet. And so as far as we could tell, it was really holding us back. Also, as Danny mentioned, we approached our incumbents. It's a density issue. As we all know, here in Washington County, we're spread out with a lot of trees in between us. And so if you're a corporate entity, then it's a density issue. It's a rate of return issue. And they just didn't want to make the investment in our area. So I'm proud to say that I'm positive to say that I don't think Calais or Baileyville would have had the resources to go and do it on their own with this. So it took a collaboration, if you will, of the two communities to get together, really to get the support. Anything you do in my realm, you need public notification, public support. which we achieved all that. We achieved local financing for the project here locally. So that was another piece of it. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And so, yeah, and so then the DBU was formed. And it's amazing to me, really 2 years in, how many people in this community still don't realize what we offer here. It's amazing to talk about it, and those people that base their whole business or spend a lot of time on the internet or appreciate the value of having faster speeds, whether it's a business that can compete out in the market with faster speeds, or whether you have kids that are playing video games and streaming at mass quantities, whatever your situation may be, there's many out there that don't understand what we're doing. And Danny had mentioned earlier about one of the things that does differentiate us from others is the fact that we provided an open network for multiple ISPs to come in. Now, the obvious thing about that is that it creates competition, which is a great thing for the end user. That's what that point is about. But the other thing is that you also have competition in advertising and other things like that, and marketing, which we're really not achieving with one. I feel on the DBU board that we've got a great partner in Pioneer. They've really helped along the way at every step to get this off the ground. And so you're not ever going to hear me say anything bad. But from a board perspective, we've never felt that this has been advertised at the level, even within the community that we'd hoped it would be. Now, we don't feel as a board that it's really our position to provide that. We think it's the ISPs that should be doing it. So therefore, that's another competition piece that we're hoping to achieve as we move through, as some of these ISPs compete for everybody's business. And we're hoping that'll help spread the word, not just word of mouth, which in essence, that's the only thing we've been able to do. The way we've got this, figured out is we need to achieve about 1,000 people between Baileyville and Calais to pay the bills and keep this going. We're about halfway there in 2 years, which is ahead of all the pro formas. And we've done it at a snail's pace from a board perspective. So, so what we have managed to achieve is work all the bugs out. And so we're excited moving forward. But, obviously what does high-speed internet in our area do? It makes our city more attractive from the municipal perspective. One thing we've learned over the last few years during this pandemic is that business as usual isn't anymore. We're moving into a different age, communication age of people working from home. Communication is done, virtually a lot now. Home-based businesses are on the rise. And these things, as we move forward into the coming years, really position Calais and Baileyville and other towns that are going to become part. It doesn't matter whether you're part of the DBU. If you achieve, high-speed fiber internet, then you're going to align yourself, to be in a good position moving forward, economically, or just build your tax base. We have a lot of residential development that we've seen. It's still hard to tell commercially in the midst of a pandemic. That just doesn't seem to be, things just don't seem to be right for investment in the current marketplace. So we're hoping that we can all get through this, and then we'll see the effect that high-speed internet has. But as far as just for residential development, that Calais has enjoyed a nice influx of people moving to the community. Some housing, some development. So we're excited about that.
Fantastic.
But,
Danny, were you able to, thank you, I don't mean to, but Danny, were you able to get your thing, seeing how he's up and talking about that part now?
No, I think I'm just going to go on without it. There's something on my end that's just not lining up right.
Okay.
I'm not
Sorry
quite sure
about
what
that.
it is, but I would chime in with what Mike has mentioned there, that one of the part of the slide thing I was going to show was how the incumbents they just don't look at our areas favorably. They state they can't make any money because there's not enough of us. And that argument really doesn't hold true anymore, because in Calais and Baileyville and Alexander, we've built the network. We've actually done the capital investment. We operate the network and we maintain the network. So the ISPs, we are wide open to Consolidated or Spectrum to join us, come on board, and all they got to do is put a piece of equipment in one of these cabinets and they could be an ISP. So the argument that it's too rural and there's not enough people, that's gone away now. So in a municipal setup, that's why I think this is such a model for the entire state of Maine. And we ought to have everybody on a municipal network. It's because these towns own this physical infrastructure. And Mike alluded to this a little earlier. When this is paid for, we figure this is probably about a 20-year run in order to get this paid for. It may be quicker than that, but let's just say 20. At the end of 20 years, that's still a revenue stream coming back to these towns. A portion of what you pay for your internet, you buy it from Pioneer or whoever, a piece of that gets sent to DBU so that we can pay for the loans and maintain the network. Once the loans are paid for, that revenue stream keeps coming. You think about it, when you're paying your bill to Time Warner or to Spectrum or Consolidated, every dime of that bill goes to that company and you see nothing but the service they provide. In a DBU model, you not only get faster service, you get symmetrical service, which is increasingly important, the same speed up and down. That is something that's overlooked a lot, but we really need more upload speeds, and fiber gives you this because people are putting more and more stuff up. They're communicating with cloud networks. They're not just bringing stuff in, they're producing. And one of the other pieces I'd like to mention too is the mill up in Baileyville, which is the largest employer in Washington County, and the mill is doing very well up there. And speaking to the manager up there, he told me that the DBU network is a major recruiting tool that they use when trying to attract talent from all across the country. And it has worked because a lot of these engineers, especially with the COVID, have been working from home. We've seen multiple houses, houses with multiple families that are hooked up on a single 100 by 100 connection with no slowing down, no queuing, no locking up. It just runs. That's the beauty of fiber. So basically, we've built something that I've been in conversations with at least 50 other towns in Maine that are trying to figure out how they can do the same thing. And we've been helping. We've been helping anybody who asks. We've shared our legal stuff with them. We shared our ups and downs, like Mike mentioned. We're very encouraging to try to get people to try to emulate this model, and it just makes sense, especially with the federal money that's out there. This is all taxpayer funds, and in my mind, taking taxpayer funds to build a network that's going to be owned by a provider doesn't make sense. I mean, let the taxpayer own the network and the provider provide the service. I think Chris is there. So we had from Baileyville. We might get him to chime in. He can give us his perspective. You there, Chris? Take it off mute.
Yeah, we go. Yeah, we are starting to see the benefits, but there are some things that you have to watch for. The hard sell right now is the older folks. Trying to, right now, what they've got works and they're used to it, and change is not necessarily their friend. So that's, I think, one of the issues we're looking at. When Danny talks about money coming back to the DBU, for every customer that pays $59.95 to Pioneer each month, $25 of that comes back to the DBU. So that's where we get our funding. And so we know what levels we have to achieve to pay for our loans and also the servicing of the network throughout the year and things like insurance. Those things are out there and are part of what you need to understand when you enter into this. One of the things he had talked about Lamb Farm, Danny. They've run the steel cable out there already, and they're already attaching fiber to it to run out to Lamb Farm to get those last 20 houses in town.
Perfect. That guy that calls me every month for the last 10 months. I can't wait till he calls me this month.
That's right. So, I mean, we're starting to see, well, he's probably seen the Pioneer truck out there putting that up. Ideally, we'd love to have 3 ISPs for competition. And unfortunately, I don't know as if some of the ISPs are ready to share their money with the towns to do this. The advantage to them is all they do is provide the service. We provide the actual network to get it there. And some of them really haven't wrapped their heads around that at this point. But yeah, we know what we've got to hit for benchmarks to make it pay for us. Because once you hit a certain level, you're not only paying for your loan, you're paying for the maintenance of the system too. And yeah, any money over and above that goes back to the taxpayers. Basically it.
Well, I'm glad to hear Lamb's Farm is getting done.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, you know, some of the conversations with the grant agencies like the MCA, the New Maine Connectivity Authority, and Connect Me, a lot of these ARPA funds, you guys, the 2 town managers here can weigh in on this, but those ARPA funds are narrow. They're kind of a narrow piece. They can only go towards certain things like sewer or water, but broadband is a piece of that. So the federal money that's coming in, and there's a couple of $100 million coming into Maine initially for MCA, and then there'll be more on top of that. There's also ARPA funds that have come to each individual town in Maine. There's also ARPA funds that have gone to each county. So like Washington County, for example, is getting 3.1 million. So there's all sorts of methods here. That one of the things I think would be advantageous for other towns is to increase Maine's middle mile. That's a big piece, getting that section over to 3-ring binder. Calais and Baileyville have 3-ring binder running right through the town. So we're able to connect to the network, and that's how DBU was able to work as well as it could. A town like Cooper is in the middle with no connection, but when Alexander gets done, it'll be at the Cooper town line. Same way with Princeton. When we're now at the Princeton town line, once they decide to join, they can attach to us as well. But there's areas like Eastport, Lubec. I had heard from Peggy Schaefer, this boggles my mind, but in Lubec's case, Route 189, they're about maybe 8 or 10 miles from 3-ring binder. But an ISP in Canada paid Maine Fiber Company to run fiber down those 8 miles right into the middle of Lubec, over the bridge into Canada. And they're housing equipment in Lubec's town office, but Lubec can't get fiber to the home there. So there's a connection actually from 3-ring binder right into downtown Lubec, and they can't connect. So that's middle mile stuff. So I think if we can take some of these ARPA funds, same way with Eastport, it's another 7 miles for them to get to Route 1. So I think a middle mile investment would help a lot of these towns be able to move towards this municipal model.
Yeah, and I think it's over $6 million the county has in ARPA funds coming, unless that's changed. But you know, I had a discussion with our county rep the other day and the rep from the UT about middle mile. He had a lot of questions. We had a really productive meeting. You know, the big thing would be, you know, how at the county level they distribute these funds, Danny. And I don't think a lot of people, you know, understand it. It wouldn't be a lottery system, or it wouldn't be just raining down a percentage by community to everybody. In the case of Calais and Baileyville, and now Alexander, soon to be, we just accepted township on. You know, one of the problems with the distribution of these funds from as far as internet goes is that anything established, so your debt service, it doesn't cover debt service. So in our case, you know, we really can't apply these funds to that. But what an opportunity for all the other towns that can take that next step, whether it's in feasibility, whether it's design. There are all these costs involved in getting, just to find out if it's feasible, if your community is on board and supportive, which you obviously, that would be the first step, is to figure that out. And if so, but there's funds that I think the county should be in a position to distribute to help some of these small towns out. Well, how they choose to move forward and want to achieve the internet service, that's up to the communities. But to me, I think it'd be a shame for the county not to designate some of these funds to help the smaller communities in the middle mile that would be able to at least get this off the ground to find out how to move forward. And we had a really good talk the other day in my office. So so I hope that the county makes a decision on that, and at least allocate some of those resources for the smaller communities. Yeah.
I think those funds come in, like the 3.1 has already come in for the county. Then next year, the next 3 comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Split it in half, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and just some of the other things, Danny, what differentiates us, for those that didn't quite get that, you've got, a strand to the home. Danny mentioned that. That's a massive amount of data that gets run through. That's not typical. It amazes me when we have our DBU meetings, and Danny will mention, the Woodland Mill has 1 strand of fiber that operates the whole mill. That gives them plenty of bandwidth, if you will, and so I don't think people understand that. And for every home to have 1 fiber designated to them, there's no more sitting and spinning that we all just love, the buffering and everything. So that's important, for people that have mass users within their home, or whatever business they've got going, they require more speed. So that's a big deal. Danny talked about, and Chris also, that once the debt's paid, that's what I'm excited about, is for the community, and what that's going to allow us to do, whether it's some kind of revenue sharing, investing back into the network as technology does increase, there's going to maintain the network. But a lot of these other communities on the periphery that see all this broadband money coming down the pike from the feds and at the state level, they're all just assuming that they're going to just be able to get this service for free. And, and there might be an element when it comes to design funds and build costs and so on and so forth, if you're starting from scratch. But ultimately, the incumbents and the ISPs are going to realize the benefit from that. They're still going to be able to charge you what they want. Whereas really, we're going to be operating, anybody in the DBU is going to be operating in the best interest of the community, and those funds, being a nonprofit, are going to be, filtered back through the community and out, and whether it's to improve the service or not. So that's really the main differentiation between us and others out there.
Mike, too, you bring up a point there that you take a look at the technology that's been offered for broadband in the country. Every technology that's been offered to us has eventually been outdated. It stops working properly. It can't provide the data transfers that are needed. Fiber hasn't done that. It's not outdated. It's like when a company like Spectrum increases their cable systems, in cable's case, it's called shared bandwidth. If you've got 3 teenagers in South Portland that are streaming video, they're impacting someone in Baileyville who's using Time Warner or Spectrum cable. So, and another piece to this, that looking down the future a little bit, is a lot of people don't realize that your cell signals, your cell towers all connect to a fiber backbone somewhere. They have got to get that signal to a fiber connection. When you have a town that's got fiber everywhere, the cell companies could actually put mini antennas on these telephone poles you wouldn't even see, and blanket the town with cell coverage. 105 bars every place you go with no ugly towers. Thinking in a grander scheme, if there was fiber on every single telephone pole in the state of Maine, just think what that would do to your cell systems, and how your mobile, which is an important piece to this, your 911 stuff, your ambulance dispatches. You know, I witnessed, and my wife and I witnessed an accident on Route 9 that a few years back that the responders couldn't get a cell signal. There were firemen out there trying to extricate somebody. They couldn't. We had to go up to a top of a hill to be able to call in. So that kind of stuff, the mobile piece is another benefit I think we'll see in these towns that are actually building municipal broadband, because it'll make it more attractive for the cell companies, which in turn will benefit from the mobile side.
You're on mute, Elaine.
Blah.
There
So
she is.
because we had some people who joined late, I was just wondering if so I just wanted to say again that this is Down East Broadband Utility, and so Dan and Chris and Mike had mentioned earlier that it's symmetrical service, 100 over 100 speeds, and their residents pay just under $60 a month for those speeds, fiber direct to their home. Just for those of you who joined late. In a couple of minutes, and I'll, get a couple more minutes if you want to use it, Danny, Mike, or Chris, before we hand things over to Lisa and Nate to talk about bluffs.
I would suggest that anybody on the call that is interested, just get a hold of us. If you'd like you have more detailed questions, or you want to actually see some of the, the back room stuff that we did in order to make this happen. We're a nonprofit. We're wide open. We're publicly, people can come to the meetings if they want. This is a very transparent setup here because we believe in it. And we believe that being transparent, especially with the public's funds, that's very important. So we're open for anyone who has any, questions after this. If they want to contact either Mike or Chris or myself, we would certainly weigh in. Right, Mike and Chris?
Well, I was going to say, and that's another point, Dan, that I don't think really we mentioned when you talk about our model, is that in Callis's case, once the council made the decision to move forward with this project after public hearing and community input, the way our model is set up is that the cost of the build, or in Callis and Baileyville's case, the cost to get this utility off the ground, those funds are assumed by the utility. So even though basically in essence, just so these other towns, if someone's chiming in, if you're interested in becoming part of the network, then there's a feasibility, there's a design cost, but then there's a build cost that's factored in. And then when basically the towns secure the note, but the DBU are the ones that pay for it. And so Chris had mentioned the $25 for the end user, $25 of everybody that for instance gets the 100 over 100 service, $25 of that comes back to the DBU. The towns aren't on the hook for that money. This is supposed to be a ratepayer based system. So even though Callis and Baileyville started this and we needed support to do that, we're securing those notes. So the only time the town is actually literally on the hook is if, God forbid, the network, the utility fails. That is when the communities would have to step up. But I think that's another important factor, is that there isn't a little bit of an outlay investment for the community to have some quote unquote skin in the game. Not much, as far as what Callis and Baileyville invested, but ultimately it's an end user driven program. It's not supposed to put burden on the taxpayer, but I just thought it'd be important to mention that.
Well, that was one of the reasons that, when we had the conversations with Alexander, that was one of the selling points. When I went to that town meeting, was like, there's people that said, I don't use the internet. There wasn't many, but, and said, well, fine. You're not going to see an increase in your taxes. This is paid for by the people who want the service, and you're paying for it. If you're a Time Warner customer or a Spectrum or Consolidated, you're paying for that service, and you're not getting any income back to the town. So, as we mentioned earlier, so yeah, you're right. This is that was one of the beauties of this model, and it's any place I've had these conversations, I haven't found too many people that said, I think the internet's going away, and we're probably not going to be using it. So I guess we don't need to do this.
On that note, fantastic. Hang tight, you guys. So Lisa Hanscom, and Nate Brimmer. Lisa Hanscom is a 19-year select person in the town of Oak Bluffs. And Nate Brimmer is Vice President of Operations, I believe, Nate, and for Axiom Technologies. And so Oak Bluffs took matters into their hands in just a little bit different fashion. So Lisa, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Sure. I'll sort of talk about how it came about, and I'll let Nate talk about the technical stuff, because that's not my expertise. So I'm actually the former select person, but my last thing that I did as select person was to get this broadband going and get a grant from the federal government to help pay for it. So at the time, actually, Callis and Baileyville was doing a lot of advertisement about their broadband system. So we were paying attention to that, and we actually was paying attention to Cranberry Isle. But the winter that this kind of all started was we were actually losing telephone service and internet service all throughout the town. And we have kind of a different system. Of course, there's a lot of internet providers out there, Spectrum and Consolidated. But while some people had supposedly like 80/10, most of us had 3/, or 5/3 for internet service. And we were starting to get a lot of complaints from residents in the town that they couldn't finish their school classes. They were being timed out of tests, and they couldn't work. We would have people move into the town of Oak Bluffs and then leave because they couldn't work out of their homes. They couldn't do that remote. So the selectmen, truthfully, I will have to say, the selectmen at the time said, well, we'll see what we can do. We really didn't have a lot of hope. I mean, what are we supposed to do? I mean, this is kind of out of our hands, was kind of the idea. We did reach out to Spectrum, we reached out to Consolidated, and we got the same response. It wasn't really feasible. It wasn't a good business model to extend that last mile throughout Oak Bluffs. And we actually had reached out. So, and we had looked at different models too, the first being Spectrum Consolidated, but then we looked at wireless and we looked at fiber, and we had reached out to Mark and Nate actually to help us sort of be consultants with us about how we were going to develop a better internet system, broadband, for the town of Oak Bluffs. We knew that we wanted, no matter where you lived in the town, to have good internet. So even if you lived a mile down a dirt road, we wanted you to have access to the internet. We knew that we wanted to have something that we weren't going to outgrow. And we knew that we wanted it to be reasonable, for the townspeople to be able to get. We are in a situation where we're on a peninsula. We have the town of Machias on one side of us and Jonesboro on the other. We tentatively reached out to the selectmen. It wasn't like an official, but we reached out to see if any of them were interested in working with us. And there was, at the time, no real desire. They didn't really think it was needed for their towns at that. And I mean, this was only 3 years ago, but a lot's changed. 3 or 4 years ago, a lot's changed in that 3 or 4 years. So we started talking to Nate and Mark about what we could potentially have. So we did decide to go with fiber. Nate gave us a lot of history on fiber, and the fact that, some of these fiber lines are like over 50 years old and they still are the fastest thing, and we knew about the 3-ring binder. And so then we started working on how do we get the fiber from the 3-ring binder to the town of Oak Bluffs. We did have Pioneer reach out to us at one point, but they really weren't interested in going down dirt roads. They just wanted to put it along the tar at the time. And one of the board of selectmen said, no, I mean, we don't want it to have the same situation we have now, where it depends on where you live in town, whether or not you have good broadband. The idea was, if we're going to spend money, we're going to actually put it throughout the whole town. At the time was a grant from the federal government that came up. We developed a team to start working on writing that grant. And it basically pays for 3/4 of the project. But what happened through the whole process for the town of Road Bluffs is, as we were discovering new information, as we were learning new things, we held public hearings. So we had like 6 public hearings in 1 year. As we got new information, we would hold a public hearing. We would ask the town people to, this is what we've learned. Do you want us to continue down this road? They would tell us yes. We would go on to the next section. We would hold another public hearing and keep getting their permission every step of the way. We then held the vote to go out for the grant. When we did that, we actually also held a vote that if we did not receive the grant, that they were just going to raise the money by taxation, you know, taking out a loan to pay for the whole thing. It's a 1.2 million, $1.3 million project to put fiber. And at the time, so we set it up so anybody that wanted service during build out, you know, if they signed up during build out, it will be put down to their house for free. We also, unless it's changed since I've gone, we also do have revenue coming back to the town from the internet provider, which is going to be Axiom. And let me back up. The reason we decided on one internet provider at the time was because we have less than 300 residents. We didn't really feel that we were going to have a lot of competition, but the fiber being owned by the town, because it is going to be our fiber, it's going to be in our infrastructure. We felt that we actually had a lot of control in a way of making sure that, or some say in how the internet provider was going to provide the service. You know, if you're not happy with the internet provider, you can always go find another one. Is kind of how the way we were thinking. I know, at least I did, and the other board developed a really good relationship with Axiom at the time. And they had a very, the whole way they had the same vision for the town of Road Bluffs, which I thought was very important. The idea of providing internet, high-speed fiber to everybody in the town of Road Bluffs is what became important to us. And like I said, we were watching Baileyville and Calais with theirs. So some of this is very similar to theirs. And we also went out and visited Cranberry Isle to see their infrastructure and their build out. And we asked them a lot of questions. And so we have some very similarities to them. I think in a way, all these broadband systems are very similar. It's just how are you going to get it done for your town? But I'm going to let Nate talk a little bit about the technical side for Road Bluffs.
Hey, Lisa, good to hear your voice. It's been a while
You too.
since we've been in a room together.
Yes.
So Axiom, we've been in business for 15 plus years, started out as a rural, you know, our history is a rural internet service provider. We started out wireless, working in Washington County. You know, the wireless technology sort of has gotten to the point where, you know, better than nothing, but not really what people need. I mean, even 5 years ago, but in the last 2 years, especially, it's a whole different world. So I can't reiterate enough, you know, Axiom does, you know, we talk to towns all over the state. We do both paid and unpaid consulting work. You know, we get a lot of towns that reach out and say, you know, hey, we're interested. And we take the time to, you know, provide quite a bit of information. And then some of those towns like Road Bluffs did enter a more formal relationship with Axiom to explore their options. And then some of those towns, you know, have begun to construct networks either with Axiom or in some cases, you know, with another provider. But I can't stress enough, you know, fiber really is, not to throw around buzzwords, but future proof. I mean, this is the technology that, 20 years from now, you're not going to be sad that you spent the money on it. I went at my house, I live in downtown Machias. I went from Spectrum, supposedly 100 by 20, fastest package they could sell me at my house, to, a fiber network. And it's just, worlds different. Even on, with two people working from home on that Spectrum network, it really is that upload speed, with Dropbox and, Google Drive and iCloud and, all this stuff syncing in the background. We would have, you'd look at the statistics, and the bandwidth coming in was sufficient, but we were filling up that pipe upbound. And what that ends up looking like is that you don't have enough download. Because you think about, oh, I'm just downloading a web page. I'm just, looking at CNN on the website. Well, your browser's got to tell CNN what content to sell you. And it's just a little bit of data. But if that upload's all choked out, that doesn't happen, and you get that spinning wheel. So super excited that, so many towns around the state are sort of realizing that this is the moment. I have lived in Maine my whole life. I've lived around the state. I grew up in Portland. Most of my life I've lived in rural Maine, and to be able to, work and communicate on the internet, with a fiber network at my house, and it's just been a game changer. And seeing that, coming down the pike for these other towns, yeah, it's just super exciting. Axiom's always, Lisa mentioned universal access. We go down the road. It could be, people call us and say, well, I'm 2,400 miles down or 2,400 feet down a dirt driveway. You're not going to come here, are you? Yep, absolutely. We're Axiom, we're a for-profit business, of course, but we're a mission-driven for-profit business. We've always believed in rural internet and universal access. So that's been important to us, and that's something that towns are in a position, it's part of why we believe in municipal broadband, is because towns are in a, what's a town, town government, what are you there for? You're there for your citizens. You're there to, provide those services, the roads and the schools and the public safety. Those are essential town infrastructures. And I think we're in an era now similar to rural electrification, where this is an essential service. This is a utility. And whether that's multi-town, something like DBU, or whether that's individual towns, building the infrastructure on their own. Certainly there's also providers that are going to build on their own. There's a place for that. I mean, takes all kinds to it's a huge project to spread this out to all the rural locations in Maine. But you're just not going to get that universal access. There's no way that a for-profit provider is going to say, oh yeah, that road there with 3 homes that's 3 miles long, sure, we'll build fiber down there at cost of $100,000. Absolutely, no, that's just not going to happen. But you get a town that's got some roads that are 3 miles long with 3 homes, and you get some roads that are downtown that are 3 miles long with 100 homes. You put that all, it's like insurance. You put that all in the mix together, and most of the time, we work with these towns. We find a way to make it work.
So real quick, there was a question. I'll just answer. I know the build out hasn't started in Rope Bluffs yet. That is one of the things I will caution people when you're working with the federal government and grants, that it does take some time and there are loops to be jumped through. So it might actually take a little bit longer. And of course, I don't think COVID helped. There's still the licensing process that I know is kind of still a problem with Consolidated and getting that all done. And Nate might have more updated information on that, but I know that that's been an issue for the town. So I think if you're looking at a grant to build out your own fiber, you have to realize you're dealing with the federal government. I think each way that you decide to do it, whether or not you go like Baileyville and Calais way, they had some legal issues and stuff. There is a process. I will say the town of Rope Bluffs did not do a feasibility study. At the time, we kind of did our feasibility study we were in a hurry. We didn't want to wait. And we did our feasibility study as we were doing the research, as we were doing the public hearings and letting the townspeople know as we did it, kind of. So those were all things that we kind of did on the fly. I know a lot of towns and a lot of organizations like to do those feasibility studies. Truthfully, personally, I always feel like that's 5 years of wasted time, because that's usually how long it takes to do a feasibility study. So we just were trying to get it done. I will also say, as a select person, when we were getting complaints, a couple of things happened. First, we didn't think as select people we were capable of doing anything. I mean, how are we going to fix the internet? We just figured, the choices we had were Consolidated, Spectrum, some of these wireless, companies, even the wireless from Axiom at the time. We felt our hands were tied. We were just telling people, yes, we'll look at it, just to kind of get them off our back, in a way. And then also, we as select people, 2 of the selectmen lived in an area that didn't have internet. Really, I was being one of them, and then one of the other select people. So we understood what was happening. We understood the frustration. We understood that might also account for a reason why the board was willing to maybe push a little bit harder than normal. Is sometimes your board, your municipal board, needs to actually experience the same, thing. And in any town, that's not going to happen. Like I said, we had one section that we couldn't even account in the federal grant, because they were actually had Spectrum and they were getting better internet service, and so they weren't included in that, whether or not they were getting lower than 10 over 2, Nate, or something.
10-1 at the time when that grant went in, I think was the federal standard. Yeah, I mean, the timeline is important for towns to consider. I mean, everybody, from DBU mentioned that, Lisa's mentioned that, Axiom, it's my life to deal with moving these administrative processes forward. The incumbents to get licensing to get on the polls. There's a period of time in statute, as I think it was Dan said, that's regularly being exceeded these days by huge margins. We've got projects that we submitted applications in February of this year that we're not going to have rights to attach to the polls until March or April of next year. So I mean, we're talking 14 months of what, from the customer's perspective and from our perspective, feels like sitting on our hands. We do a little bit of work up front, we pay a bunch of money, and then nothing for months and months and months and months. Same thing with grants. You got to write the grant, you got to gather all the data, you got to put the grant in, you got to wait for the grant to come in, you got to jump through some more hoops after you're awarded to finalize it, and then the feds this fiber, it's technical, but it's not rocket science. There's plenty of people in Maine that know how to build and operate fiber networks. So if a town can self-fund, some towns have not gone the grant route with Axiom, and the funding model is very similar to what DBU's been explaining, where the town owns the infrastructure, Axiom owns the customers. We charge a certain amount of money every month and to the customer, and then we give a certain percentage of that every month back to the town to pay for the infrastructure, to pay for the bond, and pay for the maintenance and the insurance and all those operating costs. If you're in a hurry, how do I say this? Grants are great, but they're not the free money that they look like. There's a lot of work that goes into it. It adds time, and it definitely adds costs. We're working with Monhegan Island right now, challenging regulatory, challenging technically, small population, difficult project to make happen. And I don't know, it's not really knowable, but I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the day if they end up 40 or 45% more expensive than they would be if they just magically been able to come up with the money and hire a provider and say, go do this. Best, industry best practices, make it happen. I mean, we're working with an engineering firm out of Wisconsin. They're great. They're making sure the town's going to get the value for the money. I mean, there's value to these things, but it doesn't make it cheap and it doesn't make it fast. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking and planning. What are your priorities? And some of these priorities are competing. Is it have the feds pay for it? Is it get it done quickly? Is it have local people involved? Is it, hire it out and don't have to think about it? These are all competing priorities. And whoever you're working with, your consulting firm that's helping you figure these things out, those are questions and elements that you should be exploring with them.
Yeah, and let me say, so, we did decide on the grant route, because we really weren't sure, especially when we first start, whether or not the town would even, that's a lot of money for the town of Rouge Bluffs to come up with, through a loan process. So we weren't really sure that would work. True, by the end of the process, the town voted overwhelmingly to take out a loan if the grant actually didn't come through. But there's also just in, and I'll just say, because this was mentioned with Calais and Baileyville, is sometimes convincing people that this is what they want. I knocked on a lot of doors. I visited almost every single home in the town of Rouge Bluffs, talking to people. I did all of these meetings. Like I said, we had 6 in 1 year, which is actually quite a few when you think about it. One of the things that let me back up, is if you're not getting no's at first, if people are not showing up with a no's, we don't want this, go talking to more people because they're there. Do not think that everybody wants this, because they will show up at the end. But the thing is, also the misunderstanding about fiber and wireless, because a lot of people said, well, why can't we go with 5G? That's coming. We don't need fiber in the town. And I'm saying, well, you need fiber to have 5G. So you never go. We don't have 4G now in Rouge Bluffs. How do you think we're going to have 5G? We don't even have 3G. So it is something, the misunderstanding. A lot of people who went researching on their own and found these articles and would come back, and there was a lot of talk about why fiber was the better choice than all these other things that were out there, and the board of selectmen were very determined that this is not going to be an infrastructure that was going to die or kind of outlive itself before we got it paid off. We were also figuring 20 years to really get it to a point where, then it was, and we didn't want to have an internet service because and this was nothing against Axiom, but 10 years before that, Axiom had put up a wireless device, which was great, was amazing for the town of Rouge Bluffs in that lower end. People were actually getting better service and all of that. But once they started putting more and more people on it, it eventually outlived itself. And we did not want to go that way again. So that's why we chose fiber.
Well, that is awesome. Thank you so very much. Now, I know we have some questions in the chat, and Crystal, I think you're going to read those while people formulate their questions for our presenters.
Yes, we have a few to start with. And for anybody else who has questions that you want to ask yourself, just go ahead and raise your hand or chime in if there's an appropriate moment. So I'll just start at the top, and you're welcome to either put more questions in the chat or just ask them yourself. The first question is for DBU, and the question is, with an open access network, does the resident receive 2 bills? I think you may have answered that, Danny, but if you could clarify.
Yeah, no, they don't receive 2 bills. They pay someone who signs up with Pioneer for the basic service, which is the 100 by 100. They pay them $59 a month, and then Pioneer sends the 25 to DBU. So it's a single bill.
Thanks. Second question, is there a break-even point with population density that makes the model not work?
I saw that question. That's
Yeah.
Sarah.
Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, I think the town of Cooper is a good example where, there's basically about 120 people in the town of Cooper, and this is going to cost just under $500,000. So that number, 120, even if everybody bought the service, it would be probably not feasible to think that you're going to pull that off in 20 years. But that's where the granting agencies will come in. That's where the ARPA funds and other areas to help lower that cost, to make it feasible for these smaller towns. But Sarah's right. There's, if you got 12 people in town, it could be a little difficult. But that's why this is an opportune time for these towns that can't make those numbers work to take advantage of because these federal funds are all being sent at rural towns with exactly these problems that, it's too expensive to build there. So the federal government's trying to assist that.
I'll make a plug also for smaller providers. There is a break-even point. It's a very different break-even point you can slice these models a bunch of different ways. There's a lot of moving pieces and you can make it look a lot of different ways. But at a certain point in time, the provider needs to make, they have a number that they need to make to stay in business. And, with Consolidated, with Spectrum, with, hundreds of trucks and thousands of employees and overhead, they have a higher number that they need to see for it to be attractive to them. So, that's a place that someone like Axiom that's, got relatively small staff and is, potentially willing to look at a town that, we've pretty much saturated Roque Bluffs, and we've got about 135, 140 subscribers on the books for Roque Bluffs for the new fiber network. So I don't know what the number of homes passed number is, but, Lisa mentioned 300 residents. So I'm guessing 135, 140 homes is pretty close to 100% take rate, or at least, in the 80% take rate there. So that's the other piece of it in terms of making it work, is what's your take rate going to be? And Axiom is always pushing our partners, our town partners, to come on strong with the marketing. And the towns have both a pathway, you have a tax bill and you have a town website and you have, public meetings, you have a way to get to people, but you also have credibility as a town. So the town coming behind it and saying, look, it's not just, yes, it'll help you, you'll have better internet, but there's a community spirit here. It'll help the whole town. We need to get a certain number of people to come on, be civic minded, make this happen. That push from the towns is one of the things that can make this work better at, smaller population densities.
That's a great point, Nate. And that's the thing right now that's the focus of our board is really how to translate to the local community that this is their network. Eventually it's going to help their neighbors. It's going to, help bring the burden of cost down for everybody in the community as a whole, for Baileyville and Calais. So, but when you have multiple ISPs, that's a bit of a slippery slope. We're fortunate right now, although we don't look at it as fortune, we look at it as a bit of a holdback. This model was designed to have multiple ISPs for competition and so forth. And I think more than anything, and Dan can maybe speak to this, is the legitimacy of what we've created. I mean, the whole thing was supposed to be born out of competition, so the end user feels like he's got choices, options, competition. That when we get to that point, we'll truly have achieved a major goal in this for the public, just creating choices for the end user. And the only thing I wanted to say to Sarah, just to really narrow it down for Calais and Baileyville, we've got it figured out. We just over 1,000 ratepayers will pay our bills, and we're about halfway there now. So we feel like, again, that's ahead of schedule, but that really narrows it down for Calais and Baileyville. And of course, once the debt's paid, that's when we get to jump up and enjoy all this. But that's going to be a bit, in any commercial loan now, that the length is it's a 20-year looking stint. So that's what's out there available now, and that's where we are. We've through 2 years of this, we've been paying interest only, and now we're going to basically investigate, long-term debt and financing, I should say, and what that's going to look like. So, but we're signing up people all the time, so we're getting there, slow but sure. We're happy, but from a board's perspective, where people can't sign up fast enough, and to get to the point where right now it's virtually word of mouth, and so we're moving along, and if you consider that, we're going along quite nicely. But I think once the word gets out, to Nate's point, that this is really going to help the community, and if people have choices out there, consider our service and Pioneer's service, but because it's going to help you and your neighbor in the long run. So yeah,
I think too, just to chime in a little bit there, Mike, as the DBU network adds other towns, our population basis gets bigger, which then makes it more attractive and feasible for an ISP to come in and offer the service. So as we increase from the numbers in Calais, Baileyville, Alexander, Princeton, all these towns, we become a much bigger bucket for an ISP to be attractive to an ISP.
Right. And the other thing too, Dan, that I didn't mention, I think is worth talking about, if you are an outlying town that's interested in this, is if you become a member of the DBU, your town doesn't automatically get thrown in the pot of the big picture. We break out on our balance sheet each town and their investment. Obviously, Calais, it costs so much to do the build in Calais. It costs so much to do the build in Baileyville. So it's particular to the community and how big of a scope of the project it was for the build as to what your investment is. So, even though it costs a lot for Calais and Baileyville, because we have more homes and we've got a bigger population, that you won't get thrown in that big pot. You know what I mean? So, as these towns are taking in $25, or as the DBU is taking in $25 at a time, that proportionally is paying down the debt for each community that invests in it. So that's another important piece that I think is important. That you don't just get thrown into what Calais and Baileyville have taken on. You operate with your own set of terms, if you will.
So the take rate that we wanted during build out, or when we sent it out, was 100 homes. We wanted 100 different people to sign up, and we figured as it's being built, more and more people would sign up. So that the fact that it's over like 135 or something, I consider a very good start. Of course, I truthfully would never be satisfied until every single house in the town of Rope Bluff signs up. So but they don't have to. Rope Bluff's left it so they can still choose their own provider if they're not happy with a Rope Bluff's infrastructure. If they decide Spectrum is better or whatever they want to do, we left it up to the residents to do that. But the hope is that every single one of them would eventually, because there will be money coming back into the town of Rope Bluffs to pay our portion of that grant that we had to pay, which is like 1/3, which we took a loan out for.
Fantastic. We've got about just over 15 minutes, and we've got some questions that coming in that I know are going to take some time to answer, I think. But Crystal, you had another one for DBU, if I remember correctly.
A quick one for DBU. Do you have any employees? And if so, how many?
There's a question. Yes, we have a grand total of 1. We have a network operator. He's a local businessman, and he has his own crew, and we pay the network operator, and he has his employees make the connections. He basically does the physical connections in the cabinets that actually connects the fiber to Pioneer's network. So we have 1 employee. If we get on pulling a whole lot more towns, that'll change. But as of right now, we've got 1.
Thank you. And as Elaine said, we have a couple of questions that could take a little bit of time to answer. One of them is, did you consider municipal bonds or just straight lending from a banking institute? And the other is, how is the build out in Rope Bluffs going? And I put those both out there at the same time, so you can sort of go back and forth.
Well, I think I think Lisa answered that one.
Yeah.
So she did. There's two questions here from different people, but one is, did you consider, like Crystal said, did you consider municipal bonds or just straight lending from a banking
We
institution?
considered both in the town of Roblast. And so we actually, when we went out for a town meeting and we put on the warrant to take out a loan to pay for the whole thing if we did not receive the grant. We thought that actually that the fact that the town was committed to paying for it itself would actually help us in the grant process. But we were also determined that we were going to build it. We were one of four. Mohegan Island was one of the other ones that got the grant at the same time. We did consider municipal bonds, and we considered straight bank lending, either for the full amount or for just the portion that we had to pay. We actually did take out a straight bank loan for the, 200,000 that we took out as our portion of the project cost, because we actually found that the interest rate was cheaper. And we actually even played with the number of years that we would take the loan out for. Worked with our bank lender to determine that, because it does make a difference how many times you pay, whether or not it's monthly, weekly, yearly, how long, so we worked with our bank lender to determine that.
Thanks, Lisa. Another question for the DBU. Does the DBU or the provider provide the service to the poles when the line is down? And how does that cost get figured into the cost of the project?
DBU, if the line goes down, DBU has it repaired. We bring in a contractor to fix the issue. The provider, DBU does not provide internet service. We're a dark fiber network. We provide the infrastructure to allow an ISP to provide internet service. So we have the physical infrastructure and we make sure that it's up. If the provider has issues with their equipment, if something were to go wrong equipment-wise, not fiber-wise, then it'd be up to the ISPs to come into their cabinets that we've provided on the network, and they would repair the equipment.
So let me just answer, and Nate, tell me if I'm wrong, if anything's changed, but Roblast is the same way.
Yes, that's basically it. I don't know the exact. Apologies, not super familiar with the contract with Roke Bluffs. It's been a while since I've been, a couple of years, I guess, since I've looked at it. But in many of our municipal networks, the town owns all the infrastructure. The town owns all the fiber. The town owns the equipment. The town is responsible for repairing what we call the trunk lines, the lines that serve more than one home. And Axiom typically takes on repair responsibility for what we call the drop, the fiber from the pole to the house. That's not set in stone, but that's typically the way, that helps the town say, yeah, this infrastructure is yours. You're responsible for, car versus pole, tree falling, something serious happening, affects multiple people, makes sense for the town to be, involved in that. Single customer down, less of an issue for the town. There's also a lot more of those. So there's a lot more opportunities for something to happen at those drops. That's something Axiom can, in many cases, repair in-house, or we have relationships with contractors. So, we take that on and sort of split that responsibility with the town typically.
Yeah, and that's how our contract works, is that we're responsible for the trunk line because that belongs to us, and then the drops would, repairs would go to our internet service provider.
Technically, to be clear, the drops also belong to the town.
Well,
but
yes. Yeah.
But Axiom is taking on some of that maintenance responsibility. And I've seen some of the big providers come in with what I would call a pseudo municipal model, where they say, we'll build the trunk line, you pay to build the drops, but we, the big provider, will own it all. That's a little sneaky. That doesn't sound like municipally owned to me. That sounds like the town subsidizing the provider to get that trunk line built. Because at the end of the day, what happens? The town decides to kick that provider out. Well, the town doesn't own the drops. You know, even if the town owns the trunk line, town paid for that. If Spectrum connects 400 homes, that trunk line's useless to you. You know, you're looking at a massive reinvestment to build new lines to all those homes. So, you know, put your critical thinking hat on when you're hearing some of these pitches.
Nathan, will you say that one more time? That's a really important part of this that I just need to get into my head. And
yeah, so there's
more time.
A lot of times when you're looking at network cost, you'll see it broken into two pieces. The trunk line is relatively fixed. You know, you can model, we want to build enough trunk line to serve every single home plus 15, 20%, you know, for future growth and, you know, who knows what, you know, the cost to put a fiber line up is the majority of the cost is labor. So whether you put a 48 count strand fiber up or a 96 strand fiber up, yeah, there's a cost difference. But compared to the cost of a bucket truck running down the road, drilling holes in the poles and stringing that fiber, most of that cost is labor. So that can be totally known. You can see that trunk cost, you know what that's going to be. And then the variable is connecting those drops, because you don't really know how many people are going to take service. So a lot of times in these proposals, you'll see those two costs split out. And what I have seen proposals, I've been on calls with some big providers in some towns where they have said, we'll do a municipally owned network. We'll pay, the town will pay to build the trunk line, and the town will own the trunk line, so it's municipally owned. Okay, sounds good on the surface. We, the big provider, will then help you, the small town, out by building the drops to all the homes. You don't have to worry about that. Not your problem. You just focus on the trunk line. We'll build the drops, municipally owned network. Problem is, 10 years down the road, town says, big provider's given cruddy service. We'd like a new provider. Big provider says, okay, you're glad to do that in your contract, but you're sure not using our drops. Those are ours. They're our asset. They're on our balance sheet. We paid for them. We own them. To me, it sounds like a backdoor way to lock them in, which really is a way for the town to subsidize the big provider under the guise of a municipally owned network. But if you don't own the whole thing end to end, if you don't own the fiber from the central office to the home, you don't own the network.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so the town of Road Bluffs, you know, we're providing it to all of our residents. And if they take it during build out, basically, the drop to their, like I said, we have some houses that we're going down a mile dirt road to get to their houses because they're taking it through build out. Now, we did tell them once build out's done, if you want to have service, say in 5 years, you will have to pay for that, you know, drop from the fiber to your house. So
that's a super important point, Lisa. That is a really great way for the towns to incentivize take rate, to incentivize sign up. And we do that all across the board. You know, you sign up early, it's part of the cost, it's figured into the whole municipal. It's really hard for either a provider or the town to say, yeah, we'll provide drops down the road, you know, 5 years down the road for free. You know, those could be, I mean, what we see is for costs from different contractors is if your house is right on the street, you're 100 feet from the pole, you're looking at $500 to $1,000 to run a drop, depending on infrastructure, how the network was built. There's some variables, but there's some real costs to connect that house up. So when people hear that and they say, oh, sign up now, take a year of service, get this drop built for free, that's attractive to people.
Now, I do know
one of the questions that, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm trying, we want to get to all these questions, but I know that this is one of Danny's favorites. Has anyone considered satellite link?
Oh, let me have that one.
Okay, take it away.
That is the biggest mistake being shoved down our throats right now. You look at the Elon Musk, he got $40-some million for Maine, part of the RDOF program. He's going to launch another couple of thousand low Earth satellites up there. But basically what that does is like satellites can only, you know, they have the technology that's available today. when the technology changes or needs to get faster or needs to be more robust, what's he going to do? Send another couple of thousand pieces of space junk up in the sky to be able to make that happen? Also on satellites, which is what takes place now, you can only have so many connections. They're not unlimited. There's a limit to them. And as you add more and more consumers, it's like, how hotels work. They always overbook the rooms because they don't figure everybody's going to show up. Well, I can tell you with broadband, everybody's showing up. So your speeds, you look at one of the slides I couldn't put up there was one from AT&T about, it was an ad I saw on the internet. It said faster 5G speeds to everyone. And then in really small print, it said, depending on network traffic, your speeds may be slowed down, which is exactly what will happen with satellite. So to me, that 44 million that the public is giving to Elon Musk is, you might as well just flush it down the toilet because that's where it's going. The system, the service, by the way, it for now, it works relatively well. I know some people that have it. It's not inexpensive. It's $500 up front and it's another $100 a month, but they've been able to give some decent speeds, but that's another short term. That's like, DSL worked about 10 years ago too. And where are we at now with that? So it's in the same line of thinking. So forget satellite, put a piece of fiber on the pole and get it done.
Yeah, satellite, like you said, $100 a month, though, that's expensive. When you're thinking about it, when you have families in rural Maine who can't afford $100 a month, you need a service that they can
And
get.
even with the early adoption, it's still, the equipment's like $500.
And one of the
So
things
even
too,
with-
that people really need to pay attention to this if they can, is to be at these meetings with the Maine Connectivity Authority, Connect Me. It's really important that the public be in the room, because a lot of these new ARPA grants and these new funds coming down, I've read these statutes. I've read the ones that the state of Maine has put in place for the Maine Connectivity Authority. And one of the pieces they mention over and over again is competitive, future-proof networks. Every time a decision's made as to who's going to get this money, in my opinion, those two pieces need to be yelled from the rooftops. Is it competitive and is it future-proof? Because you're not going to drive your costs down if it's not competitive. And you're certainly not going to be future-proof if you're not putting a fiber network in place. So be to the meetings, talk, please.
I think one last question that Danny, I've asked you myself before is how far is DBU willing to go as far as spreading out across the region?
Is Mike still there? I think the model that we've come up with, it's that Princeton is looking at, Alexander has already done, and Indian Township is done. When, just a little background on that piece, when a town does join, like last meeting we had, we brought on a gentleman from Indian Township. He's now on the board. So as a town joins, a person from that town is on the board because they're going to be impacted by the decisions the board makes. As far as the, like when we brought Alexander in, they were the first one after Calais and Baileyville. About 17% of the network build in Calais and Baileyville is non-infrastructure costs. It's insurance, legal, pole attachment rights, all that kind of stuff. So the model we come up with was that if a town wanted to join, 10% of what the network build cost was the cost to join for DBU to pick up. We would take away, they don't have to do the insurance, they don't have to do the maintenance, they don't have to do a whole bunch of things that if you're going to do it on your own. So to do DBU's side of it, like Mike said, each town's note will be paid back proportionally for the town joining. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, Crystal, but basically we would entertain other towns, yes.
I got a quick question. So at the time when Robless was looking to build out, you guys were just doing Calais and Baileyville. This is a fairly new thing. So you guys were just starting your build then. But I guess because this was Columbia, are you guys steadily working your way, west, toward this way? Or are you collecting towns as they connect to the network? Are you building that way? Or can you actually jump from Calais over to Columbia?
I think
Or
that
you
might
could-
be the heart of Crystal's question was physically distance wise, right? Crystal, is how far is DBU willing or what our capabilities are to go? Is that what you think that first question meant?
I think that was the question from Columbia, but if
Yeah. Right.
Joanne,
And,
if
and
you
Danny,
wanted
correct
to
me if
chime in.
correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, is anything that can tap into the 3-ring binder, we have the capability to bring onto our network. Am I wrong
That's
on
correct.
that?
That's
Yeah.
correct. As long as they can get, that's why I mentioned earlier, the middle mile piece, that if you can get that middle mile piece, so a lot of these little towns can connect to 3-ring binder, then it's a matter of leasing the fiber, passing through, Robinson and whatever, go all through these towns that don't belong to the network to one that wants to belong to the network. Yes. So
Yeah,
the distance
because-
doesn't matter as
because
long as.
our problem was that middle mile, because
Right.
we have to go through Machias or Jonesboro to get to that 3D. So that's what we had to consider when we built out or decided. I mean, we even talked about how we were going to get that fiber from Machias, Route 1 to Rope Bluffs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a lot of towns like that.
the rurality causes a lot of issues that certainly you guys are working hard to overcome. So I'm not sure why someone's just trying to enter, but okay. And then, so that wraps up today, because I like to be mindful of people's time, because I know Nate's on the job and Lisa's on the job and Danny, who knows what you're doing, and Mike and Chris, you're all working too. And a lot of others of you are too. So somebody was asking in the chat, we have recorded this and it will be posted on Sunrise County Economic Council's website under broadband, under the broadband tab. And this is going to be presented again live, except Mike can't attend on Thursday because Mike has a council meeting. So otherwise, we just tried to pick 2 different times to try to allow as many people as possible to attend. So if you have
I'd much rather do this again. Can I do that and skip the meeting? Oh, no.
I bet. So I really want to thank all of you, all of Danny and Mike and Chris and Nate and Lisa for joining us today. And except for Mike, we'll look forward to seeing you all next Thursday. So if somebody was asking about next Thursday, and it would be a different Zoom link. So you would need to register. You'd need to go on to Sunrise County Economic Council site and sign up for Thursday, because like I said, it is a different Zoom link. So it would be day after tomorrow from 6 to 7:30, and it will be live. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending and the great questions. This was the best. Nice job, guys. All right. Awesome. Thank you
Thanks,
so very
everyone.
much for attending.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Nate.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
You guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks a lot. See you later.
Bye.